arguing it needs more time to find dozens of parents perhaps no longer in U.S. government custody. Now, our next guest tried last week to visit a facility that houses separated immigrant children, but was denied entry by its employees. Joining us now, Republican Congressman Jeff Denham of California. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. Let's start with the proximate news. The government has until tomorrow to reunite the children younger than 5 with their parents. Do you think the government will meet that deadline?
There's no reason the government should not meet that deadline. HHS has said, even under the previous administration, that they've had these lists of unaccompanied minors. These kids have been treated the same way as unaccompanied minors, so there's no reason, no excuse why they wouldn't know exactly where they are all the time.
Well, look, this same administration, Secretary Azar of HHS last week gave us an estimate for the number of kids overall. He just said fewer than 3,000. He doesn't know the full number here. So it's clear that they don't have an exact accounting of where all these children are, isn't it?
Well, there's no reason they shouldn't have an exact, I would say not only exact, but to the moment, know exactly where each of these individual kids are.
So
they should. But I think that's part of the problem. And I think tomorrow is going to be self-evident on whether they know how many, where they're at, what the process is. And those are the questions I had for the facility that I went to visit. Just show us the conditions these kids are under right now and let us know. First of all, you ought to be able to tell their family, their relatives, their parents exactly the treatment that these kids have. But secondly, you ought to know immediately, if you know when the court process is, you ought to know immediately when the reunification process is.
So that facility hasn't given you those answers, the one that turned you away, not yet, correct?
Zero. I couldn't even get the director of the facility to come outside and tell me, you know, how old is this facility? What are your hours of operation? How many kids? I mean, even the basics. I could hear her behind the door, but never open it.
Has the administration given you any answers?
No, but we had pre-cleared this. I mean, the administration knew, the White House knew, as well as HHS knew that I was going to this facility. Ultimately, a lot of what we're dealing with now is a law that needs to be changed. Both parties should be working together to craft and to pass and do it immediately. But if you can't even get these questions answered from the current administration, how does Congress do its job to actually fix the problem?
In long term, there do need to be laws passed to address this situation, but there's no question, there's no argument at this point that these children, the estimate of fewer than 3,000, as HHS now says it, they were separated by a decision made by the Trump administration, separated and then not accounted for. And what I can't figure out is, you know, we can't get answers. We've been asking these questions, but you, a Republican member of Congress, if you can't get answers to these questions, what does that tell you?
It's certainly frustrating. Any member of Congress, doesn't matter party, you should be able to know those that are being sent to your district, those that are going to impact your district, those that are really going to impact our country. We ought to know exactly how many kids there are and what the process is for unifying them with their parents.
Is this an issue of competence or is it an issue of decency? Is the government just not up to the task of actually counting, or do they not want to?
I don't know. It'd surprise me if they don't want to, but certainly they should be able to. Whether they release all of those numbers to the public, certainly members of Congress should know exactly what those numbers are. We ought to be able to do it at a moment's notice.
You don't seem to be ruling out the possibility, though, that there is a question of will here.
Sure. This is, I think it's horrible optics.
But it's more, but you agree, and I'm not pressing you because you've been knocking on doors here. You've been trying to get answers. It's more than optics. I mean, there are 3,000 kids here. We're talking about kids that were separated from their parents by a decision made by the U.S. government. It's just not a bad look.
I would agree, but I also believe that we should know these family detention units, these residence facilities that are along the border. We're moving to expand those. We had those in my bill that failed 2 weeks ago. We should know how many more we need and what the extent of those are, not only to make sure that this process stops so that we make sure that kids are with their parents, but secondly, we've got to know exactly what this reunification process is and the timeline. And I think tomorrow is going to be pretty telling.
Congressman Jeff Denham of California, thank you for your efforts to get answers here. Keep on pushing, because we need to know the answers to these questions. Appreciate it.